I really do think you had a really strong start to this, and I thought so from the beginning. Like your opening scene was compelling, and obviously when you laid out a bunch of choices for me, it was what appealed to me. So I drew to that opening scene. But then as you write, you kind of get used to it. You're like, okay, that's how the book opens. This is how it works, and we're moving our way through. So for you and I as authors, we put our best into a book, but there's a certain point, 2/3, 3/4 of the way through, where it's just we're not mailing it in, but it's kind of the idea of, okay, this is today's work. This is just the job to write this book. So the pieces that we're like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Now that's just part of the fabric, and we're doing a job now. We're getting this job done. It's our favorite job, but it's the job we're doing. Right. So then passing that book off to a publisher, and then the editor and other folks too, it kind of I sort of was reminded how strong that first scene was by how other people reacted to it. So like you start out, you're basically starting out with a mystery essentially, and you're also starting in the middle of the action, and you don't know what's going on, and the character himself doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
So when people reacted to that, when they're like, "Oh, this is really good," where the publisher essentially was sold on the book right from the beginning, and then read all the way through to kind of confirm his initial intuition. It reminded me why I liked the idea, why this was the book I wanted to write when you presented the ideas. Do you typically, like when you start a story, are you typically seeing the first scene? Because you sort of explained that with 138, but I seem to remember you describing other stories the same way, where sort of you see the very beginning of the book. So is that typical for you as a book idea comes up? Are you kind of walking into the opening scene and then deciding if you want to go forward with it?
Yeah, I think that opening scene has to be really strong, because I look at, and like I'll mentor other authors and younger authors, and I'll read some of their stuff, and I always say you're starting the story in the wrong spot. You're starting the story from, the most boring story is the alarm goes off.
Yeah.
And he gets out of bed, and he goes to takes a pee, and then he goes and he makes his coffee, and then he goes outside and gets the morning newspaper, and then a bomb goes off.
Right.
Well, but by the time the bomb goes off, you're already bored with the character.
Right.
So I always say to them, start it where he's trapped under rubble. The bomb went off yesterday, and he's trying to figure it out. Like that. To me, that's, you got to jump in with the action. You have to jump in with that really good opening line and that opening page. Because a publisher's not going to read that. The publisher's not going to even touch that.
Yeah.
So I always try to come up with, and it doesn't always have to be action, but it has to be something that's going to draw you in as a reader. So it always starts there. I'm just working in my head. I'm going to do a thriller series in next year. Mm-hmm. That'll be my main focus. And I already have in my head the movie of that opening scene, which really tells you who the main character is. It's action. It's a lot of movement, and I have no idea where it's going from there, but I know that opening scene of that very first book hopefully will grab somebody and make them want to read more. So for me, I knew the opening scene for this book. I knew his name, and I knew the rules, and that was about it. And a lot of it too was you and I sitting there and me pitching the book, and then you saying, okay, tell me more. And a lot of that was just off the top of my head.
Oh yeah.
These are and we're going to do this, and this is the rule, but without going, this is what you need to write. Just saying, okay, this is what I have in my head. Let's see what we both do it. I mean, we did the same thing with I think with Yard Full of Bones. For me, was that opening scene.
Yeah, that was another one.
Where I knew the two main characters. I knew somebody was already dead. I knew the basic idea there. And I mean, that first chapter, when I wrote that first chapter, that's pretty much except for a couple of typos, that's how the book starts. I mean, there really wasn't a big edit or any change at all in that. So we ran through, and it's fun because Yard Full of Bones and Room 138 were my ideas, and then The Enemy Held Near and The Hidden Truth were your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, we those opening chapters, for me anyway, when I read like The Enemy Held Near or The Hidden Truth, those first chapters, for me it was, all right, there's a lot to work with here,
right,
as a writer. So I understand that you've set the mood, you set the tone of the book, you've done all of that, and how do I slip into, there's that J. Armand voice there.
Yeah.
There's that German, we'll call it. And we slip into that voice in between the way we both write. And I like that because you can't tell. I mean, you can't tell who wrote what chapter unless we're telling you now. If you picked up all 4 of these books and read just the first chapter of all 4, without knowing, you would be hard pressed to go, oh, that was Jay or that was Armand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that we complement one another's style, and we have very strong openings. Anything I've ever read by you is a very strong opening that makes you want to read more.